Well, good morning. How is everyone? I hope you are all well. May I just say, you're looking fantastic. As usual. We've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible because it's Sunday, and I know you guys have got better things to do than stare at my face and listen to this debacle as normal. But look, there's a lot of things happening around the Idaho 4 case, and it's a strange thing to say because as much as there are things happening, there's not really anything much happening in the case. Yes, there are hearings. We're seeing Bryan Kohberger seems to be asking for an extension on the time given that he is able to give a alibi. And there seems to be some confusion around that. Like, people have turned around and said, look, if he's got an alibi, then he would have given it by now. And, you know, I get that. You would expect that in the event that he has an alibi, he would have technically been able to give it when he was very first questioned. But what people have got to understand is this. Look, you can be in a certain situation, in a certain area, and that makes you seem suspicious. Like, if you are in that area and no one knows you're in an area, or there isn't really any reason for you to be there, then, you know, just say, we know Bryan Kohberger was an avid runner. For instance, I'm not saying this is what was going on, but imagine he's an avid runner. He doesn't want to run around Moscow, but he wants to run around Idaho. So, because he doesn't sleep, we've heard people talk about the fact that Bryan Kohberger was a bit of a night owl. So he goes out for a run, but he drives down to Idaho and he runs around there. So he's not with anyone, he's just running around there. He doesn't necessarily use the app that he's connected to, he just goes for a run. And again, I'm not saying this is what happened, I'm using this as an example. And where he's running, all of a sudden, there is this crime that happens. So he's there, he's got no witnesses, he's got no real reason to be there, but he is there. How would you then get yourself out of that situation? How would you... when you're charged for that crime, how do you come up with an alibi? If there isn't any witnesses, there is no explanation for you being there, so on and so forth. So getting yourself an alibi is not always something that you can do with respect of looking at yourself and the situation that you was in. You sometimes have to look into what was going on around you and the crime itself, and find something that says, well, look, if this happened, this can't be me. If this happened at this time, or do you know what I mean? An alibi is not always something that's very, very transparent. It can sometimes be difficult to get an alibi. You have to, again, you have to look at everything and work out where there is something about this case and this crime that means that you can't have been the one who did it. So it does sometimes make sense that some people are trying to, you know, extend the time. At the end of the day, he's got the right to go over the documentation. There are so many things that go against what many people think in terms of Bryan Kohberger. And I will just say this, I just want to touch on this before we talk about the matter at hand. We have seen Steve Gonsalves recently, he over the last couple of days, and he's done a video, and he sort of alludes to the fact that this seems to have been a jealousy-motivated crime. And we've heard the likes of Ken Maines talk about how these crimes done in this manner always seem to point around a certain mould, if you like, and that is that, you know, this incel thing, or someone has been rejected. So this kind of relationship between a male and a female that is in some way gone awry, and it's turned into a murder. But I want to bring your attention to the fact that Bryan Kohberger studied, you know, criminology, etc., etc. So he had the same teachings. I'm not saying he had the experience, but the foundation, the groundings to, you know, these crimes and why crimes are committed and how they're committed, so on and so forth. Now, Bryan Kohberger had apparently spoken on the crime himself to a neighbour, and he himself had made the statement that the crime seemed like a crime of passion. Now, imagine this, right? Brian Koberger is the person who done the crime. He's talking about the crime, but showing acute awareness of what the crime looks like because of his teachings. And not only that, but he has a conversation about it to say that this crime looks like a crime of passion, which, from a training perspective, that would have been exactly what this crime looked like. But what I'm struggling to ascertain is why Brian Koberger would have done this crime in this fashion, knowing full well how the crime would have been perceived by people investigating it. Now, if it turns out that he was stalking on social media, so on and so forth, and all of the things that coincide with this stalking situation and how it then leads to the event itself, then he really was the most stupidest person in the world. And you almost have to ask yourself whether he was purposefully looking to do a crime that would get him caught. You know, we've heard about the multiple mistakes in leaving the knife sheath at the scene, driving your own car, getting caught on cameras, the issues with the phones, you know, the many things that you look at and you think, oh, this guy's stupid, book smart, street stupid, or whatever. But he was seemingly acutely aware of how this crime would be perceived to people investigating. And if that's the case, then he would have... You can go off in two situations here. You can either think to yourself, did he do it with the hope that someone else, such as Jack perhaps, would get collared for the crime? And, you know, but ultimately he wouldn't have known if Jack had a solid alibi. So, you know, there's loads of things that make you think that can't be possible. He was doing it to try and frame somebody else. But yeah, you have to ask yourself why he would have done this crime in this manner when his teachings would have taught him that this would have then been investigated and tracked in this specific manner. And if he'd done the things, again, social media stalking, etc., they would find out. They would have looked. He knows that they would have gone through their social media history. They would have looked at who they were messaging, who they were calling, who they got calls from. They would have looked at all that. He would have known this, 100%. He would have known. So what was he trying to do? Was he trying to set himself up? Because you have to ask that question. I can't see this guy being this stupid. I genuinely can't. And I think if anybody does think that he's that stupid, then they are incredibly naive. Now, I'm not saying that I could be wrong. He could literally be that stupid, but come on, really? Come on. Could he really be that stupid to commit a crime in the exact manner with which he knows it's going to be, he knows it's going to go. He knows it's going to be investigated. Anyway, let me know down below what you think of that. And we're going to now talk about the true matter at hand. And that is, look, there are so many lies and there are so many contradictions in this case. We've still got this situation with the Drunk Turkey show. And look, I'm not going to go too in depth in that. Again, Julez of all trades done a fantastic video on it yesterday. I'll leave the link in the video for those of you who have not seen it. I know that a lot of people have, but she talks specifically about the fact that there seems to be some confusion or some issues surrounding whether the families are talking to the survivors. And, you know, you then bring the likes of Kim and you bring the likes of Dave into the mix, and they then start throwing a few spanners in the works with regards to the timeline of Jack DeCure. And, you know, was he in Moscow and didn't find out until around noon when all the police were at the property? Or had he left to go and pick up his girlfriend and come back? And did he really not hear before because of we know that there was the Snapchat communication? Why wouldn't anyone have gone to him earlier if this was all happening? So there's some issues there, and they do exist. The issues do exist, unless just the likes of Kim and Dave and everyone are just lying. They're nothing to do with it, and they are just throwing things on the internet. But Do you know what I mean? They exist. But one of the things that seems to have come up that is a real sticking point is with regards to Dylan Mortensen and this 8-hour shock phase. And I know we've done this over and over again, but I just want to really hammer this home because people don't seem to get it. And that is Dylan Mortensen is in the house. And this is what I have a problem with. She's in the house and there's obviously Bethany Funk in there as well, who was another surviving roommate. So you've got these two people, and at some point in that night, something happens, and the lives of 4 other housemates are taken. There's seemingly a situation where Dylan Mortensen sees somebody leaving, and they leave, and she watches them go out. Now, there's a time that is stated within the documentation that talks about 425, and the Gonsalves family seem to be saying that that time is referencing the time that Dylan Mortensen had called the housemates. So what we're trying to say is Dylan Mortensen heard some noises, she sees somebody leave, she then, a few minutes later, tries to ring the callmate. Or what you've got to think is the car was seen at around 4:20 a.m. And that is when we believe that whoever did this was speeding off at pace. So it would appear that just after that person left, she obviously jumps on the phone and she starts trying to call the other people in the house. And I'm guessing that would have included Bethany Funk. So if Bethany Funk was awake, would Bethany have answered the phone? Would she have answered the phone? So I've then got to think to myself, right, so what does Dylan Mortensen then do? So she's heard some noises, she's watched someone leave, she's tried to ring everybody in the house and there was no answer. So what happens from that point? What happens after that? Does she do nothing? So A, she does absolutely nothing. She sees someone, hears something that's enough to make her think, I'm going to ring round and see what's going on. No one answers, and then she does nothing about it. Or she goes and have a look round. She can't hear nothing. She's watched somebody leave. So does she go and have a look round the house? And I think to myself, why would she not have gone and looked around? Unless you was of the mindset that something could have happened and you could see something that perhaps you don't want to see, or that you was in danger, I can't work that out, why you wouldn't have gone and had a look round. And if you was compass mentis enough to make those calls and think something's gone on, why would you not call 911? If you're too scared to then go and have a look, but you've already tried to ring round in that house, why would you not just call 911 and say, look, I've heard some noises, I've just watched someone leave, I've tried to call everybody in the house and nobody's answering, and I daren't go and have a look. So there's that. But then we hear that there is apparently a Snapchat situation where people knew early in the morning. We're talking around sort of 9:30 in the morning. So then I'm thinking to myself, so is it at that point that perhaps Dylan needs a toilet, she needs a loo, she's gone out and she's seen stuff, and then she's contacted people at the sorority through to the chat and whatever. This is what I'm struggling with. I'm struggling to understand what happened around that person leaving and 911 being called when you've got elements of information that would state that Dylan Mortensen was compass mentis. She was making phone calls. And I think to myself, they lived in an area that was apparently free from crime. In terms of this hadn't happened. They'd had a murder, what was it, back in 2015. And I think to myself, what would have made somebody so scared that they were frozen in shock phase? If you want to go down that route, which that wouldn't seem to be the case. What would seem to be the case is that she's tried to ring the other people in the house and they haven't answered, and then you've got this, and then what happened next? You know, this to be continued situation. And that's what I'm struggling with. We hear elements of this case regarding the victims themselves, and we hear terms such as bled out. And bled out to me is a term that's used when someone is bleeding and there's eventually a point where there is that much blood loss that they die of the blood loss. And you have to then ask yourself, with respect of what happened, could someone's life have been saved? Now, we'll never know that. I don't think we'll ever know that. And some people will say, no, the injuries were so catastrophic. But again, you're speculating. You're speculating. And we've seen it in black and white about bled out. And, you know, or I say in black and white, people who are close to the case, that has been stated. You know, this isn't about victim blaming. This isn't about attacking people. This is about, and Jules said it again, she said about the fact that the search for the truth isn't always pretty. And you can't just say that you want the truth, but then only be willing to talk on certain topics. And the things that are unpalatable or unpopular, you then don't go near them because you know that they're not going to be received well. Like, I know this video isn't going to be received well because people don't want Dylan challenged. But I ask you to let me know down below before I go, and that is this. Just say you had skin in the game. These were your children who was in this house. Are you telling me, with the information that is out there now, and the fact that that delay exists, and you heard that she was calling around the house, you've heard that there's these Snapchat messages that seem to show that people knew hours before the law enforcement were contacted, are you telling me that you would be happy to just sit back and say, look, they had no involvement whatsoever, there was nothing, frozen shock phase, it's understandable, and I don't want that challenged, I don't want it spoken about, it's just leave it? Are you telling me honestly you wouldn't be even a tiny bit curious as to what happened in the time after supposedly the white Hyundai Elantra left Moscow and the law enforcement operatives who attended the scene at midday, that call was made? Honestly. There's a lot of lies, there's a lot of things being hidden, there's a lot of contradictions, and there's a lot of things in this case that don't make sense. And for now, I'm not in a position where I can confidently say Brian Kohberger's the man, because it seems to me that the conclusion that he is purely based on the expectations of this crime based on what it looks like. And they are simply ramming it into a mould that exists for this style of crime. Let me know down below, and I'll catch you all in the next one.